commission chambers.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there, Commissioner.
It's not that big a deal. I think they're used to us reading things, making motions like it should be. I move.
Mackenzie, do you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you, or I can at least. Shouldn't speak for everybody.
Oh, there you go, that's cool.
Mackenzie, how you doing? Did you shorten this proclamation down for Friday? It looks shorter to me.
Hey, Stuart,
We write them fresh every time.
You what?
Yeah, I said we.
you may actually
write
know how to
them-
do this without causing me a lot of hassles. Is there a reason, how do I get rid of this and make this bigger? Is there a way to do that, or am I stuck with this? Or, you know, it's like, is there a way to do that? If you can't right now, it's not the end of the world, but I just like, I have no clue. Yeah.
Oh, you're not using it.
So I just reopened the mail because I gotta read that when it was on there, just put it back on. No worry about it, it's no big deal. If you didn't know how to do it all along. Yeah,
Oh, you're using the building.
actually you made it disappear, where'd it go? It disappeared.
Mike Meinzer with us or no?
I don't see him on there.
Don't see him.
You clicked on something and,
He said depending on traffic.
oh, no, I don't wanna send anything.
We'll do his prayer. I'm doing his
That's
prayer.
Okay.
okay. I know what those are, focus.
I think I'm up next.
He made it disappear. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. Yeah, that worked a little bit. It's just limited.
Welcome to the April 26, 2021 meeting of the Sandusky City Commission. Prior to tonight's meeting, we'll have an invocation offered by myself, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. God, in what may be our greatest time of need, please be with our government officials and their staff as they deal with the challenges of today. Give them wisdom on how to best represent everyone. Father, we also ask that you give our leaders courage so that even when it's hard, they will continue to boldly represent their constituents' needs and those of the most vulnerable among us. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Spriggs, will you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Mr. President. Mr. Waddington,
Here?
Mr. Poole,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Brady,
Here.
Ms. Twine,
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine is not with us.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that we could excuse Mrs. Twine from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Commissioner Twine from tonight's meeting. Discussion? Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. I believe that we do not have Commissioner Meinzer with us at this time, although he may join us later. So I believe we should have a motion to excuse Commissioner Meinzer in case he does not show up.
Mr. Chairman, I move we, okay, so second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, Commissioner Meinzer is excused also until he shows up. Hopefully he will show up later. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of April 12th, 2021. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the April 12th meeting and dispense with the formal reading.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Ms. Spriggs, are there any questions from the public that pertain to tonight's agenda?
Mr. President, we have comments from two individuals tonight. The first comes from Ms. Sharon Johnson of 1139 5th Street in Sandusky. In regards to consent agenda item A, she said, please explain the lowest and best bid and the local preference. How does it benefit the city when the out-of-towner may have the lowest bid, but the local gets the job due to the preference clause? It does not seem to be fair bidding with the local preference clause. For consent agenda item B, she asked, I would like to know if the city's transient bus program is still in the red and by how much. For agenda item 3, she said, I am not clear as to what is happening to the Cold Creek properties. Is Hody actually buying all 44 properties from the city or just managing the sale of the properties? The assessments on the parcels are being forgiven. How is it fair to the rest of the homeowners who have to pay their assessments? What is the total amount of write-off assessments of the 44 parcels? For item 4, she said the city is purchasing 2111 Parkview Boulevard for $48,000. Why is precious money coming from the Cdbg fund when there's a real estate fund for this kind of purchase? And for item 7, she said the canine police dog is retiring. Is the city getting another canine dog? The second individual is Mr. Tim Schwanger of 362 Sheffield Way in Sandusky. He writes in regarding consent agenda item C. The Sandusky transit system is a valuable transportation tool for Sandusky and Erie County residents. The Sandusky transit system was marketed as a self-sufficient program funded through grants and ridership fees. Over the last few years, the program has relied on significant Sandusky tax dollars directly from the general and capital budgets. Each year, there is discussion at the commission table to seek financial assistance from Erie County commissioners to provide revenue to offset Sandusky transit expenses. This year, the city is poised to subsidize the transit system, spending $360,000 with $0 coming from Erie County. Has city administration given up on approaching county commissioners with a request to financially participate?
Thank you, Ms. Spriggs. Will those questions be addressed as that legislation comes before us this evening? We have a public hearing regarding Cdgb budget. This hearing is going to be conducted by our Debbie Eversole. As this is a public hearing, Ms. Eversole will incorporate questions previously asked from the public during her presentation, as we customarily do. And commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions at the conclusion of this hearing. Ms. Eversole, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner President Brady and members of the commission. Good evening, audience and staff. This is the second of two public hearings concerning the City of Sandusky's Program Year 2021 Community Development Block Grant. The first public hearing was held on March 22nd, 2021. As an entitlement city, the City of Sandusky directly receives an allocation of funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to carry out selected activities within the community. HUD recently announced that the allocation for the City of Sandusky during its program year 2021, which runs July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, will be $750,212. A minimum of 70% of these funds must benefit low to moderate income persons or households. All of the funded activities must meet one of three national objectives, which include 1, low to moderate income benefit, 2, elimination of slum and blight, or 3, community urgent need. Under this grant, there are certain requirements which cannot be exceeded. In general, these include the maximum of 20% of the allocation be expended for administration expenses and a maximum of 15% of the allocation be expended on public services during the program year. The Department of Community Development hosted 2 Consolidated Plan Advisory Committee, or CPAC, virtual meetings and 1 virtual public hearing announcing the planning process and proposed draft budget for the program year 2021. Comments from each of these meetings were given serious consideration and implemented into the program year 2021 budget if possible. Permitted uses of Cdbg funding includes housing, public improvements, public services, blight elimination, and economic development, all of which will see a portion of the 2021 allocation. A draft of the action plan was made available on March 31st, and a 30-day public comment period commenced on the same day. The comment period will end Thursday, April 29th, 2021. Public input on the draft program year 2021 annual action plan can still be submitted by written correspondence to the Department of Community Development, located at 240 Columbus Avenue, Sandusky, Ohio 44870, or emailed to development@ci.sandusky.oh.us. A draft of the program year 2021 Cdbg annual action plan budget is shown on your screens. There are 8 proposed projects funded. Each project can have a number of activities tied to it, according to eligibility. Because it is near impossible to determine what each specific activity may cost until a job is bid out, the projects may seem broad and inclusive. This protects the city from going back to amend the action plan every time a new activity is proposed, according to available funding. Amending the budget takes a minimum of 45 days, which could hinder a contracted job from getting done within a program year. So we'll go through the screen here, and the 2021 draft budget is the allocation is $750,212. As stated, 70% of that, or $525,148.40, must be used to benefit low to moderate households or areas. There's a 20% maximum that can be budgeted into program administration, and that amount is $150,042.40. 15% maximum can be budgeted into public services, which is a maximum of $112,531.80. So going through the proposed budgets or programs, program administration, the proposed budget is $120,042.40. The planned activities can include overall program administration, comprehensive planning and indirect expenses related to the planning, implementation, management, monitoring, and evaluation of Cdbg program and eligible activities. Number 2, fair housing is proposed at $10,000. This includes advertising, counseling, outreach, education, and informational pamphlets related to fair housing. Item 3, public facilities. The proposed budget is $320,000, and this can include, but is not limited to, public infrastructure improvements and ADA accessibility for, not limited to, installation, removal, reconstruction, improvement of streets, sidewalks, and curbs, public building improvements, improvements to neighborhood facilities, and/or parks and recreational facilities. Number 4, code enforcement, $100,000. Salaries and overhead costs associated with property inspections and follow-up actions, such as legal proceedings directly related to the enforcement of state and local codes. Number 5 is a new item, code compliance assistance. This is proposed at $67,637.80. And this can include remediation efforts of certain code violations to bring eligible households into compliance with state and local codes. Number 6, public services. This is proposed at $90,000. We did receive applications, which I'll review in the lower portion, but we do intend to fund as many of those as we can. Number 7, youth programming is proposed at $22,531.80. This can include implementation of the summer park program and the spring and winter break camps, along with other activities for children residing within the city of Sandusky. Number 8 is another new activity, strategic planning. This is proposed at $20,000. And strategic planning can include strategic planning or comprehensive planning in areas of public transportation and/or city parks, subject to the program administration cap. We do have some funds that will not be spent during the 2020 program year that will be carried into the 2021 year, and that will be clearance and demolition in the amount of $110,000. This is due to a ordinance in 2019 that transferred revolving loan funds from the fiscal year 18 into that budget. So there was funding in that category for this year's projects. So that will carry over into the 2020 budget. So all of that totals $860,212. But the $110,000 will not be spent out of the 2020 budget. So we hit that target of $750,212. Any carryover within a specific category will remain within that category for 2021 expenses. Any carryover within the 2020 budget for program admin or public service will be placed in the clearance and demolition category. So right now, we did receive some public comment. I'm just going to remain on the former screen here for a second while I read the public comments that we did receive. The following comment was received during the comment period in an email dated 4/17/21 from Sharon Johnson, 1139 5th Street. There's a total of 5 or 6 here, so just bear with me and I will respond to them as I go. $320,000 for public facilities. What do you have in mind for public building improvements? Can there be more detail on public facilities and what projects the city is looking at? The expenses are too basic and not enough detail. What sidewalk and streets? What kind of improvements to what parts, etc.? And the response to that is the only firm activity proposed includes reconstruction of eligible streets. As stated in the presentation, it is almost impossible to know what these contracts are going to come in at. So we are allowing for backup activities to eliminate the need for a substantial amendment, which could take 45 days to get approval. Comment number 2 from Sharon Johnson, $67,637 for code compliance assistance. Please explain further the remediation efforts of certain code violations that money can be used for other than removals of trees on private property. Response is, this being the first year of assistance of this type, the city intends to focus on removal of trees on private property that are currently in violation or a nuisance or in danger to the neighbors. The target will be to help low to moderate income people in the areas, and this project will be bid out by a professional tree contractor, and the city staff will have no part in this remediation effort. Comment number 3, $90,000 public services. What kind of public services? Details, please. At the time that this budget was posted, we did not have all the applications scored or reviewed. So my response to this is the city received activity requests from youth programming in the amount of $50,000 for their summer park and summer park program and spring and winter break programs. And they also propose a bike distribution program. OGO requested $50,000 for the remote food locker distribution unit. Erie County Senior Center Meals on Wheels requested $40,000 to carry out their meal delivery service. The Center for Cultural Awareness requested $50,000 for their Proud to Be Me and Stepping into Manhood mentoring programs. And the Erie County Metro Housing Authority requested $110,000 for the Bay Shore Tower elevator replacement. It is intended that when the final budget is presented to the City Commission, we will have all of these activities plugged in for your approval. Question number 4, $20,000 strategic planning of public transportation. In what way is there a problem with public transportation? Why is the city looking at this kind of planning? Response, the city would like to reserve a portion of this funding for eligible strategic and comprehensive planning efforts. These planning efforts could be in the areas of public transportation or the public parks. Number 5, there needs to be a proper budget with what the money is going to be spent on and the expenses for each item. I don't like the idea of plugging in basic numbers with no specific breakdowns. That appears to me to be a statement, and I did not have a reply for that one. I think it was answered up in the first category, though, where it's kind of hard to budget this a year out. So that's the end of the comments. And then there were no other comments received during the second CPAC meeting on March 31st, where this draft budget was presented to them. So as a reminder, the timeline is as follows. We've gone through most of this process. Tonight is the second public hearing in the City Commission chambers. We have April 29th will be the ending of the 30-day public comment period. May 10th, the annual action plan will be considered by City Commission. Final action will be requested on that date. And then May 14th, the program year must be delivered to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development by the end of the day. So there was just a little comment here in red that we moved the second public hearing up to tonight in order to get the draft plan in front of the City Commission for careful review prior to being asked for approval for the plan submitted on May 10th. And I think I did already explain that once the 2021 annual action plan has been approved by HUD, the City of Sandusky, or the Sandusky City Commission will approve each subrecipient agreement prior to the funds being expended. So that will be for the public service activities. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm happy to stay on for any discussion or comments. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions for Ms. Eversole?
I do. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wadding.
Yeah, I'd like to ask her, I know 2 or 3 years ago, we had the paint program that lower moderate income folks, if they wanted to paint their house, they didn't have the resources, instead of letting them fall into disarray. I'm wondering, maybe next year or something, if we could look at that again. We had that, I think Mr. Murray was on with me, maybe Mr. Brady at the time. We used to have a paint program where if, in fact, we had like St. Mary's High School went out and painted a couple of the houses. We supplied the paint, the brushes and that. And then I know we've got active partners in the community that would help with the painting program to help. I guess this would convey or lead into the neighborhoods to try to help out, any house that we could save by painting it or upkeep. I think we need to look at that. Maybe I'll bring that up under old business tonight later on and see if there's some way that we could reinvent that wheel, or maybe have the city manager look into that and see what his comments would be. But I thought it was a good program. We saved some houses and they did a pretty good job. Thank you.
Additional questions, Commissioners, for Ms. Eversole?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole?
I support what Commissioner Waddington said. I think a paint program is something that needs to be looked at seriously. I'm not really excited about the concept of giving away bicycles, especially without any explanation of how you plan to do it. We have a rather large city here with probably a significant need for children with bicycles. And with the other issues we have going on in our neighborhoods, trying to select how you plan to select specific individual kids to get bicycles just doesn't make sense to me. I do wish to recognize that the public facilities, $320,000. The question of who and what you're spending it on is important. There's certain criteria that we're supposed to meet for using these things, using this money. And without knowing what you're spending it on, where the projects are, what they're going to be, and I'm not particularly interested in the money. The fact that you can't identify how much it's going to cost to do a specific sidewalk, to do a sidewalk project isn't the problem. The problem is we don't know what sidewalks you're doing, and you're asking us, fortunately, not to approve it today, but as we move forward, I need to know what you're spending this money on if you want approval to spend it. Public services, you indicated that was going to be reviewing contracts? Is that what, or reviewing applications? How many applications did you get last year of this nature?
Well, of this nature was during the COVID-19.
I know when it was.
The beginning of the pandemic. So they were received through the CV funding. And there were only 2 received for that.
Okay, I'd like to suggest that $90,000, if you go 10 times the 2 you received last year, $90,000 seems to be a bit much money for that. Also, that $90,000 for reviewing contracts seems to me to be a duplication of the administrative fees. I'm not sure what the difference is between administration of the program and simply reviewing applications. Seems to me it's one and the same. You don't have to answer it now, it's not a question, just a comment going forward for when you bring this back. Likewise, strategic planning for public transportation. If we're gonna spend Cdbg money on that, just some concept of what you're trying to accomplish. You talked about strategic planning, and these words don't have a whole lot of meaning. We have grown our transportation, our bus service very well over the last few years. And so I'm not sure what consultants or whoever it is you plan to funnel this $20,000 to, but I'd really like to, when you come back, something more concrete about what it is that's wrong and what it is that you're looking for to spend the money on. So thank you.
Additional questions, Commissioners? I think we're all in agreement that as this progresses and as legislation comes before us, there's going to be a lot of blanks filled in, and we expect that, and I'm sure that will happen. I want to thank Ms. Eversole for her hard work on this. This is, I don't know, the second or third public hearing we've had regarding this. The Cdgb is such an important piece of the puzzle in the city of Sandusky. $750,000, or really about $100,000 more than $750,000. Very significant, and it represents just exactly what the words stand for. Community development block grant money. It's going in the neighborhoods in some fashion, and we're going to get, we've gotten a view from about 5,000 feet tonight, and I expect to get a view from about 100 feet as legislation comes before us. Thank you, Ms. Eversole, for your hard work.
Thank you.
I'll declare this public hearing closed. Commissioners, you have before you several communications from staff recommending various legislation. Can I have a motion to accept these communications?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved. Commissioners, we have 3 consent items to consider this evening. Do any of you wish to move these items to the regular agenda? And I do understand that there are questions regarding the consent items. That does not preclude us from having a discussion on them, and that does not necessitate us moving them off the consent agenda. I do expect staff to respond to those questions asked, I think, by Ms. Johnson and Mr. Schwanger. So do any of you wish to move these items to the regular agenda? Ms. Spriggs, will you present the consent agenda?
Yes, President Brady. Coming up on your screen, you should see tonight's consent agenda. Well, the numbering is off, but item A is to amend Ordinance 21-034 for a Scribner's error. Item B is permission to apply for the Ohio Department of Transportation grants on behalf of Sandusky Transit. And item C is permission to apply for the Ohio Department of Transportation Rides to Immunity or Community Immunity Grant Program on behalf of Sandusky Transit.
Having heard these ordinances and resolutions, Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
I move to accept the consent agenda and declare that all ordinances and/or resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. I believe there were 2 questions that pertain to the consent agenda. Item A, I believe Mrs. Johnson asked a question regarding perhaps the local preference issue. Is that the question? I'm not sure what that was, but I think it was Ms. Johnson's question was regarding the local preference issue. Perhaps Mr. Klein, you could speak to that, or perhaps our law director, one or the other. Are either of those 2 staff people around today?
Hi, this is Brendan, the law director. I can answer from a legal perspective about the local preference and lower best bid, but I would defer to Director Klein on kind of our policy preferences on that. But one thing I want to say about the lowest and best is a reminder that it's lowest and best. It's well established under law in Ohio that there are a number of reasons that one would select a bid, and local preferences and other things. There's preferences for a number of things that are also commonplace among municipalities across Ohio, including the state of Ohio uses them. And these are all factored in to allow municipalities to have the flexibility to find the absolute best contractor when they bid things out. So it's perfectly normal and actually pretty commonplace that something like this would be considered. And then I would defer to Director Klein and other staff members on the policy preferences about our local preference.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. I believe there's a question now from Mr. Schwanger on regarding item B on the consent agenda, and I'm working from memory, Ms. Spriggs, but correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the basis of his question dealt with perhaps a contribution or lack of a contribution from other parties that benefit our transit service. Perhaps Mr. Webster, you could speak to that issue. Mr. Webster needs to turn his mic on.
Through the commission president, to the commission president. So speaking as to the third-party beneficiaries of Sandusky Transit, I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Ms. Spriggs, could you repeat the question Mr. Schwanger asked regarding item B?
Absolutely, and just to be clear, both Ms. Johnson and Mr. Schwanger had questions on Sandusky Transit. Mr. Schwanger, would you like me to read the whole question?
Just the
Yes.
specific piece, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, he ended it, his last question said, has the city administration given up on approaching the county commissioners with a request to financially participate? And Ms. Johnson asked to know if the bus program is still in red and by how much.
So thank you, Commission Clerk Spriggs, and I apologize, the third-party beneficiary made me think you were speaking to our contracted partners with transit, which is what threw me off a little bit. But what I would say is the $30,000 grant received from the Erie County Community Foundation, as well as the potential inclusion in Cdbg for transit funds for transit strategic planning, is a direct and specific way that we are trying to address those issues. I think our less formal and more informal requests over the years have not allowed us to develop the partnerships. And so what we're trying to do is to put together a group of stakeholders that include the third-party beneficiaries of Sandusky Transit, including other local jurisdictions, as well as the county, as well as potentially some of the businesses. We've had more success with those direct beneficiaries like Cedar Point and Kalahari and some specific agencies like serving our seniors. But what we do need to do is to elevate the conversation in a broader way that allows us to look at what the best way to fund transit is, what the role of the city should be in that funding of transit, as well as how other communities do it. And the goal of that strategic planning process will be to identify best practices and to create a sense among stakeholders as to, you know, where that burden and that opportunity lies. So the strategic plan is really how we're trying to address those bigger picture questions. We have not given up on transit. We think that we've forged a lot of partnerships with some of those private partners, and we've greatly enhanced the service that we provided going into the pandemic, which obviously caused a lot of stress on the system. But we do know we need those public partnerships as well, and the strategic plan is one way that we hope to accomplish meeting those needs.
So the short answer to the question is we certainly have not given up on reaching out to other governmental bodies. So hope springs eternal, I guess.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Poole.
It seems to me that the partners here that we're talking about are our neighbors, and our inability to have a conversation with those folks without some consultant or some contract or some outside force coming in here for $30,000 or $40,000 or whatever it may turn out to be just seems backwards. You know, if we've reached out to the county and Cedar Point and those folks out there, and I think we have with certain businesses in the community and organizations, we have contracts already. I'm trying to figure out why every time we turn around, we have to pay some gigantic consultant fee to put together a plan for something that we should be able to, that we haven't worked out amongst ourselves. If you're paying somebody to mediate because we have arguments or disagreements with these folks, that's one thing, but let's get on the table. What exactly is the problem? I mean, the fact is we all know who benefits from this, and it just seems that I have a problem with spending as much money as we do on consultants to tell us things that I think we should be doing, at least starting on our own before we call somebody in to tell us what we need, the obvious of what needs to be done. Thank you. It's just a statement, not a question.
Have we dealt with both Ms. Johnson and Mr. Swanger's issues on item B? I believe we have.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
just two comments quickly. One, With respect to the local preference, Mr. Waddington and I were on the commission way back when that was adopted. There was a lot of public support to adopt that ordinance at the time, and I still think it's a good idea. The advantages are very slight, and I think that there are good economic development reasons for wanting to support local businesses. The second point that I would make about transit is I do not recall at any point in time that anyone suggested that transit would be a break-even proposition, that it would be self-funding. I don't think, certainly that's not been true in the years that I've been on the city commission. And if you look around the country and indeed the world, there's no place that public transit is self-sufficient. But it's a fallacy to compare it to the private transportation sector, because the private transportation sector is also significantly subsidized by government. You know, the local roads that we're in the process of repaving, those by and large aren't used by transit. Those are used by private vehicles. And so I just think a little bit of perspective is important. We're providing an essential service, and it's been wildly successful. And I'm happy to continue making the investment in transit. Thank you.
I agree, Mr. Murray. The benefits to our transit system, I think, far outweigh the dollars that we have to fork out each year, it seems like. Keep in mind, there's so many, and I learned this quite a long time ago, there's so many people that without public transportation don't have a job. If you don't have a job, your life spirals into a lot of really bad things. So I continue to try to focus on the fact that the many people that make use of public transit are not using it necessarily to go on vacation or go to Kalahari. They're going to Kalahari to work. They're using it to go to Cedar Point to go to work, to provide for their families. So, yeah, we do write some money out of our own taxes to support transit. But I believe that is like bread cast on the water. I believe it's returning almost tenfold.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waddington.
I'd like to ask the city manager, Mr. Webster, I know we had a conversation maybe a month or 5 weeks ago, article that I read in the Sunday Plain Dealer about the cuts for funding for the busing and that. How much did we end up on the state budget? What was the loss? It was pretty substantial, wasn't it?
No, through the commission president and Director Jonathan Holliday may have slightly more information on this than I do, but my understanding is that the most of the funds were restored into the actual state budget at the end.
Oh, they got
the governor
back.
came
Okay.
through by restoring those to the budget. And just to be clear, the funds that we received from that pot are specifically for our capital expenditures as it relates to transit, not the operating piece. So it would be our ability to buy buses or to make other physical improvements to waiting environments in the train station itself that would have impacted. But I believe that what my last update was on that, and Jonathan can correct me if I'm wrong, that actually in the last budget request, they restored that funding after a lot of lobbying from transit agencies and communities that are dependent on transit.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the ordinances and resolutions.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, those ordinances and resolutions are passed. We'll turn to our regular agenda. Ms. Springs, will you present item number 1, which is a resolution?
Item number 1 is a resolution authorizing the city of Sandusky to become a clean future Ohio community and to adopt a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the city, and declaring that this resolution shall take effect under suspension of the rules as contained in and in accordance with Section 13 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Waddington.
move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 13 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Webster, can you, perhaps it is your office that can give us some clarification of how this resolution ended up before us?
So we were contracted, we were contacted by the enterprise for, I'm looking for the name of the exact organization. Hold on, I have it right in front of me. Give me 1 second. The nonprofit group that is dedicated in Ohio to working with local communities to mitigate the impact on climate change that they are having. And we began a conversation from a policy perspective with some commissioners, and then brought in staff, including Public Works Director Klein, Law Director Brendan, and then with Jonathan coming on board, Director Holliday, and have worked to prepare this resolution, which is aspirational in nature. These are very broad goals that we as a community want to put into place that show that local government can take direct action to minimize our impact on climate change and our carbon footprint. But we know that collectively it will take many communities to do this, and we don't necessarily have anything beyond the broad aspirational steps today. But as we begin our next strategic plan, the goal will be to look at ways that we can mitigate our impact on climate change and our carbon footprint. And I know Jonathan has been involved in this more recently. I don't know if you want to speak to this in any more detail than that, but that's how this got to our table. It was a direct request. Many local governments are signing up for this. And it's something that we've heard from commissioners and from the community. It's important enough to them that we wanted to begin to step into this direction to, kind of more transparently state what our goals are to become a more climate friendly city. So with that, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to say anything else.
Commissioners, go ahead, Mr. Holliday.
Just as Eric mentioned, this organization is really focusing on these partnerships with local communities in order to reduce greenhouse gases. I think it's going to be a good framework for us to move towards these aspirations in terms of providing accountability and also the structure in order for us to achieve this goal. So I'm excited to be involved with it and bring members of my team and other members from the community together in order to work towards this goal.
Thank you. Additional questions or discussion, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
this is about leadership, and I think that our community has a role in providing leadership and example of how it is that we should treat our environment and the people that live in that environment. And I think it's also about return on investment. I think about the roof that's right over my head right now. Some 8-9 years ago, we put a bunch of solar cells up there. 3 weeks ago, we passed the gigawatt mark. And that's been a good return on investment for our firm. These things are capital intensive. You have to have the capital to invest. The city has the capital to invest and to yield the long-term benefits. So I think it's both things. It's about leadership and it's about proper stewardship of public dollars and resources. Thank you.
Excellent. Commissioners, I probably don't have to remind you that we are blessed with our Director of Public Services, Mr. Klein, has been proactive in these efforts since the day he came to work for us. He is constantly looking for ways to, perhaps a lot like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. Everything that we build or he engineers, he looks for ways to reduce our carbon footprint. I know that's not like putting a solar array on our roofs or building windmills. Those things can and are very costly, but there are a lot of things that we're doing in engineering right now that make great sense, and I applaud him for doing that, and I agree with Commissioner Murray. It is about leadership. We have somewhat of an obligation, or a very real obligation, to leave this planet hopefully better than we found it. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the resolution.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, that resolution is passed. Ms. Briggs, will you present the next item, please?
Item number 2 is a resolution in support of Amtrak's proposed expansion of passenger rail services in Ohio and for the congressional actions needed to authorize and appropriate funds to the expansion, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Harris.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. This communication is sponsored by Mr. Horstman. Is Mr. Horstman with us?
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. Just to give a little background, this is a proposal that Amtrak released a couple of months ago that would dramatically increase service on the national rail network. Sandusky being one of only 7 cities in the state of Ohio that currently has any Amtrak service that's primarily in the middle of the night. This plan that Amtrak proposed would add 3 eastbound and 3 westbound trains coming through Sandusky during the daytime, as well as connecting Cleveland to Cincinnati, and allowing us to get to Detroit, Chicago, Buffalo, Pittsburgh much easier. And so the funding for this is proposed in the president's jobs plan, but this plan has been supported. Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, various cities through Ohio have voiced support for this plan and think could be advantageous for Sandusky's connectivity and would do a lot of good for our transportation connections in the region.
Discussion, Commissioners. Ms. Spriggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Meiser?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the resolution.
Mr. Meiser?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, that resolution is passed. Ms. Spriggs, you present the next item, please.
Item number 3 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an exclusive right to sell agreement with Hody Enterprises, Inc. of Sandusky, Ohio, for the marketing and sale of 44 vacant parcels of land in the Cold Creek Crossing subdivision in Sandusky, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
I
Waddington.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I would like to make clear that these properties will be still paying the assessments. There was maybe some confusion, one of the public comments about that being unfair, that the other, these folks were not being required to pay those assessments, whereas other neighbors who already purchased had to do so. That's just a misconception. In fact, Michelle Reeder provided us with an example of this is how the monies will be distributed, and those assessments will be paid from that. Thank you.
Mr. Holliday, I wonder if you can speak to the question I believe that Ms. Johnson perhaps had on, regarding this piece of legislation. I believe the question revolved around an erroneous concept that we were selling the properties to the Hody. That certainly is not the case. Now, I'll let you speak to that.
Correct, Commissioner Brady. This legislation allows us to partner with Hody so that Hody can market the properties for us. The goal really is to identify other buyers that are interested in purchasing these properties to build houses on them. Hody certainly is not prevented or prohibited from being a buyer. However, that's not the current plan, and there's been no indication that that's going to be happening. This is merely to market the properties and list them with Hody as our broker.
And it's my understanding, Mr. Holliday, that the price has been, we've agreed on pricing for these lots and the properties for any multifamily use based on 90% of the auditor's appraised price. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioner Brady, the price for the single-family lots is based on the auditor's appraised value at 90%. And then the price for any multifamily properties will depend on the number of units that are being proposed to be built on those properties.
Excellent. Additional discussion, Commissioners? Ms. Spriggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
I'll abstain from this due to my business relationship with Hody Enterprises.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Abstain.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, that ordinance is passed. Ms. Spriggs, you present the next item, please.
Item number 4 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a purchase and sale agreement for the acquisition of real property located at 2111 Parkview Boulevard in Sandusky and identified as parcel number 58-00976.000 for the purpose of blight elimination and demolition, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waddington.
Okay. I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Got a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Holliday, I know that sometime this afternoon or sometime today, I think you provided us with kind of a breakdown of pricing in that area. And I wonder if you can just kind of recap that for both ourselves and for the viewing audience.
Absolutely, Commissioner Brady. In recent years, the city has been active in the purchase of blighted properties in this area. And before we brought this item before you, we did review the past purchase amounts on a per unit basis. And this negotiated purchase price almost exactly matches the price paid for properties in the last 3 transactions that the city's undertaken in this neighborhood. But just to be absolutely sure that the current market conditions supported this purchase price, we did obtain a broker's price opinion, which also supported this purchase amount.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Commissioners, discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Poole.
Yeah, Mr. Holliday, would you explain what the plans are for this area? That's what seems to be justifying and driving these purchases. What exactly are you going to do in that area?
Commissioner Brady to Commissioner Poole, the city's neighborhood initiative really identified blight elimination as a key priority in this neighborhood. So the city has been actively acquiring properties like this for the last number of years in order to eliminate blight. This property is badly deteriorated. Only 3 of the units are able to be occupied. So this property is being proposed for demolition. I'm happy to discuss our plans to undertake a neighborhood plan in the Southside neighborhood. And I think that that planning process that we'll undertake later this year will help to further refine the vision for that neighborhood. And our acquisition and ownership of these properties really puts us in a key position in order to use that planning process to rebuild that portion of the city of Sandusky.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
I would suggest that we're paying entirely too much money for these properties to be demolished. First of all, there seems to be no justification for it. I'm looking at the cost of what we spent on them. To suggest in a blighted area that the price of the properties is almost doubled in 3 years. You've paid the same amount of money, and just in listening to what Mr. Holliday said, there's 3 units there, and one of them is uninhabitable. We paid the same price for all 4. Now, I'm looking at the prices that you provided. $26,000 for a 4-unit, $35,000 for a 4-unit in 2018, $25,000 in 2020, and somehow or another it's jumped to $48,000. 45. I have to vote no for this. You are when we started this process, we were acquiring blighted properties that we picked up in sheriff sales. This has morphed into buying out people that otherwise, if this property currently is on the tax rolls with paid up taxes, with 3 people living in the units. And I'll get back to that, because you can be thinking, what are you doing with the 3 people that live there now that we're about to own the property? And you can answer that in a moment. The fact of the matter is, we are just passing money on the folks who bought property for next to nothing in the past, rented it essentially through Metro, and as you've seen, have not put anything into these properties, which is why one of the 4 is now not habitable. And you still want to, and we are driving the market up. These market prices of 45, 48, these large expense costs per unit, these are the ones we put there, not the market. And additionally, your BPO, I read the BPO opinion. It doesn't cite any reason for it. It just says it. It just says, this is the property, this is what's there, describes it, and says, I think it's worth $48,000. Not that it's necessarily wrong, but as you're asking us to spend an enormous amount of taxpayers' dollars on a piece of property that we're not going to get a dime out of, let's assume that the $1,700 a month that it draws in rent now might possibly make it worth $48,000. We have no use for it in that fashion. We're not going to rent it, or unless you're going to tell me later that we are. Otherwise, this property should have stayed in the hands of the property owner, and at the point in time that we need it, we can buy it. Between now and then, it should stay on the tax rolls. So now you can tell me what you're doing with the 3 families that live in the units after we purchase it.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Holiday. Go ahead, Mr. Holiday.
I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Poole that the property will only be transferred to the city if and when it's vacant. So I can't comment on the current occupancy of the 3 units that are able to be occupied. But what I can tell you is that our agreement is subject to the property being vacant. So it will only come to the city if and when it's fully vacant.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
does that translate into the property owner will push the people out? The people can live there the rest of their lives if they choose to, and then we'll buy it? What is that? Well, how does that work? See, what you just described is just an open-ended conversation, doesn't mean anything. Is the landlord planning when are we planning to close this? How's that? What is the landlord expecting from us in terms of when we're going to close this deal?
Commissioner Brady to Commissioner Poole, the draft purchase agreement does establish a closing date, and don't have that here in front of me. I believe it's relatively short time frame. Attorney Heil might have that exact date, or if the purchase agreement was provided to the city commissioners, it would be there. But we have settled on a closing date that's identified in the purchase agreement with the prospective seller that he's agreeable to. And if the city commission passes this item this evening, we will proceed with executing the purchase agreement and closing on or before that date.
Generally
Additional
speaking,
comments, commissioners?
yes. Generally speaking,
We'll have comments from the other commissioners.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you've had 2 bites at the apple. I think you've had 3 bites at the apple, Commissioner Poole. Additional comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
if there's any part of the apple left, I'll take a bite. I would like to place this in some context. We agreed as a commission more than 5 years ago on our bicentennial plan. And one of the key propositions in that plan was the South Side acquisition zone. Or if that wasn't part of the plan, it was a corollary to the plan that was necessary to execute on the plan. We have long eyed the South Side as an area that is deserving of being rebuilt and rehabilitated. There are strong neighbors in that area, strong homeowners in that area. They shouldn't have to put up with a lot of stuff that we've purchased over the years. I can't comment on this particular property. I did not go to inspect it. But many of the properties out there they're grossly substandard. And we have been driving at being able to provide a better life for and support for that community. And I think we are on the cusp of being able to do that with having acquired a significant amount of property and looking later this year to begin the South Side development plan. I'm excited about that. That'll be one of the most important things I think this commission accomplishes. And this is a continuation of those investments. The prices that have been paid for the last several acquisitions are relatively consistent. It is true that early on there were some lower prices paid, but I'll tell you what, if we're contributing to improving the value of properties in that community, I'm all for it. Let's keep it up. Those neighbors deserve it. Thank you.
Additional comments, Commissioners?
Now,
Commissioner Poole.
we can get back to those folks that are moving out. I assume that, let's just assume for argument's sake, short time is 30 to 60 days. What's the plan for those people? The concept of it's going to be empty when we get there doesn't change the fact that for no apparent reason in that you don't have a plan, you're talking about sometime in the distant future applying for a plan. We're about to put 3 families out of their homes, which may very well end up in 3 incomes going outside of the city limits that we don't get, plus the money you took off the tax rolls for the property itself. And the last property that we bought was also habited by folks. 2 of the apartments had people living in them, and the taxes were paid. And this, I understand, Mr. Murray, I totally agree with you. The South Side could use something. I don't see what it is we're going to do for them. You're simply putting people out of their homes prematurely with no real plan for what you're going to do except dangling this carrot that somehow or another you're going to help these folks on the South Side without any idea or who. In fact, I know that at least one person over there who owns property has spoken to the city about buying those so that they can fill those buildings with people that they'd like to have as neighbors. Yet we have this magic plan that we're talking about is going to happen, that we don't even know what it is. And we're overpaying for the properties, and we haven't driven the property values up. The only property values that are up are the ones that we're actually spending taxpayers' dollars on. So enough said. Thank you.
Ms. Briggs, we call roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, and now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
No.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, that ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present the next item, please.
Item 5A is a resolution approving the submission of an application to the Erie Regional Planning Commission Metropolitan Planning Organization for financial assistance for the Meadowbrook Subdivision Sidewalk Project, and if awarded, authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into the LPA Federal Local LET Project Agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution A, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this resolution 5A under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Mr. Klein, I wonder if you can share with us the scope of this piece of legislation.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. So as you are aware, we become pretty aggressive when we find out that there's money available to be spent, especially when it's available in the neighborhoods as well. So unfortunately, our metropolitan planning organization only gets about $100,000 a year for this type of, whether it's environmental or walkability, sidewalks, it's the transportation alternative dollars that they get. And right now they're accepting project applications for fiscal year 25, which actually begins in July of 2024. Well, when we saw the announcement come out, there were two projects that rose to the top of the list for us. The first one here is the over in the Meadowbrook Subdivision, Timber Ridge, that area. There's a lot of individual parcels that were not developed. What typically happens in a subdivision is that when you build the house, you also add the sidewalk. Well, since those weren't developed over the last 15, 20, however many years, there's a lot of sections of sidewalk that is just not filled in. What we'd like to do with this first application, if we are awarded, is to spend in a 50-50 split almost $200,000 for completing the sidewalks in that neighborhood and making it truly walkable so people don't have to go out onto the streets. And if you don't mind, on the second application for 5B.
Yes, go right ahead.
That one is to make Hancock Elementary School safer for the students that will be going to it. We'd like to do some pedestrian crossings, to do the sidewalks and the curb ramps in the area, to make a safer drop-off zone for the students. And unfortunately, the timing of these dollars, like I said, is July of 24, but that would be about a $175,000 project that we would split 50-50 as well. So, these are things that we're aware that there are a lot of needs out there for transportation alternatives, which would be those walkability issues or cycling or any of those alternate forms of transportation. But these are two of them that we would really like to do. We would really like to apply for right off the start.
Discussion, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser?
Ms. Klein did bring it up, but I thought about that when we talked about the bike path out at Conrail tracks in the West End. I think we've been struggling with that overpass from Huntington, Butler, Parish over there for decades. That might be a good place to put something, the same thing there, just like a crossing warning or something. I know it was about $150,000 for two crossings, but maybe if we can do one for 75, that might be money well spent.
Additional discussion, Commissioner. My only frustration with this piece of legislation is that it is out there almost 4 years if we're successful. And I would certainly like to see improvements made in those areas prior to that. But Mr. Klein never looks a gift horse in the mouth. He is always looking for grants and funding from a variety of places, and we thank him for that. Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Is this on resolution A or B or just
Resolution A.
abstain?
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the resolution A.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Abstain.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, resolution A is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present that same item, item number B, please.
Item 5B is a resolution approving the submission of an application to the Erie Regional Planning Commission Metropolitan Planning Organization for financial assistance for the Hancock Elementary School sidewalk project, and if awarded, authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into the LPA Federal Local LET project agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman?
Would that be Commissioner Harris?
Yes, I move for the adoption of this resolution 5B under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Same concept, Mr. Klein, just a different location, I understand.
Yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
Additional discussion, Commissioners? Ms. Briggs, you call a roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the resolution.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. That resolution B is passed. Ms. Briggs, you present the next item, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to approve the first and final change order for work performed by Mosser Construction, Inc. of Fremont, Ohio for the wastewater treatment plant ferrous chloride system rehabilitation project in the amount of $17,550.42 and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I move for adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Klein, once again, your department, just a brief overview of the first and final change order.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The project, which was to relocate the ferrous chloride tanks from inside to outside because we were having significant problems with them, is now complete. The work that was done for the unit prices, quite a few of them were underbid, some of them were over quantity, and this change order represents the final change in quantity for the most part. There were a few items that needed to be added, safety showers, the eye wash stations, those types of things that needed to have some extra work done. One thing that was not included as part of the budgetary information that I had erroneously left out was that we will be seeking partial reimbursement for this from the county, as this is one of the projects that's included in the sewer services agreement.
Add that to the list. Additional questions, Commissioners? Ms. Briggs, will you call roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. That ordinance is passed. Ms. Briggs, will you present the next item, please?
Item number 7 is an ordinance allowing for the sale of Sandusky Police Department K-9 Officer Honor pursuant to Section 25 of the City Charter and approving the retirement of K-9 Officer Honor and authorizing the sale of K-9 Officer Honor to his handler, Sergeant Edward Olemacher, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the City Charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I only wish the dog a long, lengthy life with his handler.
Additional discussion, Commissioners.
Just, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Poole.
just thank the Sergeant Olmacher for being willing to take his companion and keep this dog. It's good for the dog and testimony to a good officer.
You know, if you, at first glimpse, you'll say, boy, this dog didn't serve us very long, and until you multiply it times, what's the normal rule, times 7, you find out that he is entitled to a wonderful, hopefully a wonderful retirement.
Yep.
And I certainly wish him that. I believe there was a question on our agenda items regarding, I believe it was from Ms. Johnson, whether we're going to be replacing that canine dog. Chief Oliver, can you comment on that?
I can, Mr. President. First of all, thanks to the commissioners for the kind words about Canine Honor. Sergeant Olemaker's been a great handler. He was an officer when he started his career as a handler. He's recently been promoted, so he's taken on several more job responsibilities. So operationally, it was the right time for Honor to go into retirement. Previous to my appointment here with the city, when I was at the sheriff's office, I was involved in selecting a canine that was going to serve in our corrections division. That canine was purchased just previous to my appointment here. The handler cannot accept the responsibility of that canine. That canine has since been offered to the city of Sandusky by Sheriff Sigsworth, so we're pursuing that avenue now, where we should have a second canine here very shortly.
Good deal.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome, sir.
Additional discussion. Ms. Briggs, you call roll on the motion, please.
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes, and now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer, Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady.
Yes, that ordinance is passed with our thanks. Ms. Briggs, you present item number 8, please.
Item number 8 is an ordinance amending Part 5, Chapter 531, Section 531.09, 531.10, 531.11, and 531.12 of the codified ordinances of the City of Sandusky in the manner and way specifically set forth here and below.
Commissioners, having heard this ordinance, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murray.
I believe that we need to pass this on first reading
I'm sorry.
under the charter.
Excellent.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second discussion
Is this on first reading?
on first reading.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I was around when we adopted the first ordinance of this type, and I've always tried to stay in the role of commissioner and not act as the city's attorney, but it is my recollection at the time that the state-of-the-art legislation was what we adopted. These things change with time in terms of sense of what is appropriate and fair notice. And Mr. Hiles advises that sense has shifted within the legal community, which would include courts. And so I support this change. It does put another step in front of us, but only one step, and I think it's a good change and support it.
Additional comments, Commissioners? Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Meinzer,
Yes.
Mr. Waddington.
Yes.
Mr. Poole,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Brady,
Yes. And now on the ordinance.
Mr. Meinzer.
Point of order.
Oh.
Commission President, we just need to vote on the motion since it's on first reading.
We only need a vote on the motion?
Correct. The recommendation was for first reading. It'll
Okay,
come back
so we
in
don't need a
next-
motion, we don't need a motion on the ordinance?
Yeah.
Then that passes on first reading. That be correct, Mr. Howe?
Yes, sorry, I muted myself.
That's all right. Ms. Spriggs, will you present the next item, please?
Item number 9 is a resolution objecting to the renewal of permits issued under sections 4303.11 through 4303.183 of the Ohio Revised Code to Doghouse Bar LLC, doing business as Doghouse, for reasons including those stated herein, requesting a hearing and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this resolution, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Murray.
I thought we'd all be competing to make that motion, but I'll be honored to make the motion to shut this miserable place down and move that we adopt this resolution pursuant to section 14 of the city's charter.
Second.
Been a motion, and I think a boisterous motion and a very quiet second, I believe, came from Mr. Waddington. We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I'd like to thank staff for putting this together, the law director, chief police too, he's been involved with a lot of this. It's definitely a quality of life issue with the noise, the litter over there. Several neighbors have contacted, I'm sure all of us, even today, this morning, I was contacted by Matt Westerholt, and he had some of the residents that lived in that area that stopped in down there, and I told them that we had this legislation on for tonight, item 9, and they were thrilled. But I know it's slow, but I think we got to keep pounding on this door, and we got to get this place shut down. Thank you.
Additional discussion, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Commissioner Poole.
Yeah, go ahead.
Commissioner Harris.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Poole. I just kind of wanted to add some context, especially even from a personal standpoint, and kind of also perhaps just get out in front of some narratives and or stories that may unfold as a result of us passing this piece. Several months ago, it was kind of just, on my conscience even to act as a conduit between, the city and the owners and or the individual managing this establishment. Through that, I had just simply, told him, in other words, to begin, changing the environment around there, one that is more conducive, for not only the bar but the neighbors as well. And as far as maybe some of the preconceived notions and or conclusions that may come of this, I do not want to caution anyone that even attempts to make this a city versus this establishment and or a city versus a specific group of people. I would just like to dead that because it's simply a matter of, again, of public safety, as many of us know. And so I ask that, prior to, making any of those assumptions, that we just put ourselves in the position of those neighbors and those who have kids and all of this other stuff. Because as we see, whether it's, the city of Cleveland and other surrounding cities, we oftentimes see stray bullets and or unfortunate accidents, come about, this type of behavior. And although some of this may not be occurring inside of this establishment, one thing that has been hashtagged over the last couple of weeks has been accountability. And so if you're going to run an establishment such as this, it's important, that you take just that you take accountability for not only what occurs on the inside of the establishment, but the outside as well. And so, that being said, the city of Sandusky and obviously the police staff has my full support on this. But again, I just wanted to offer you all, that that bit of context. So thank you.
Commissioner Poole?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I live in a neighborhood, and I fully support all the neighborhoods, and I feel for what the individuals that have lived there, the problems that they've had. I do want to say that I'm voting for this, and I think it's a good thing for us to do for the following reason, which is up to now, this has been a one-sided conversation. I don't doubt any of the things that have been presented by the neighbors in terms of their perspective, but we're doing the right thing as a commission, because there will now be a hearing in which the folks at the dog pound or doghouse bar will have an opportunity to present their side of the story to the state, and we'll bring this to a conclusion the way we do justice in America. Everybody gets to have their say, and we'll come to a conclusion. If I only accepted what the neighbors had said, I would probably be as animated as Mr. Murray is and the rest of you are, but I do recognize that what has to happen is that we need to do what we're doing now, which is bring this to a public hearing so both sides are heard. So I'll vote yes on this. Thank you.
Additional discussion, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meinzer?
I'd just like to say that thankful that the residents, their patience, that this hasn't blown up into big proportions. I think everybody, and I got a lot of complaints before, and I took a little heat for the Dairy Marts and the 7-Elevens and all these places, that it isn't the owners and it isn't the business, it's the customers that it draws at 11, 12 o'clock at night. They're already caught up, well on their way in a drinking binge or whatever, and they show up late at night and they're raising hell in the neighborhoods. And the state controls it, and I wish we could, as a community, regulate it. But it's difficult when the state calls the shots on this. So I'm going to vote yes. I'm grateful to, and hopefully the state will listen.
Additional discussion, Commissioners? A couple weeks ago, had an opportunity to reach out to both Senator Gavarone and DJ Swearingen and ask for assistance from them from the standpoint of providing our city with some contacts that we may not have at Liquor Control, Department of Commerce. Both their offices and themselves personally, both Senator Gavarone and Representative Swearingen could not have been more helpful. They provided us not just with contacts, but they put us on a conference call, I believe, with the Department of Commerce, and they also were very helpful. The bad news there is that none of the actions we're taking are a quick fix. I spent this afternoon in the neighborhood where this is located, and I spent some time in the neighborhood, and it's a beautiful neighborhood, but it's Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Not so Sunday night at 2 or 3 in the morning, I guess. I had an opportunity to talk to one of the residents, and I shared with them, as we all now know, that we can't wave a magic wand at this issue. We are a country of laws. We are a city of laws, and you can't just seize people's property or deny people their rights. So I agree with Commissioner Poole. We are moving in the right direction. We are inching in the right direction. Not a quick fix, but I assured this neighbor that we're going to put on a full court press. And I presumed that we would pass this legislation tonight, or this resolution tonight. And that is the start, the first step, I think, that what might be a very long, but hopefully a successful journey. The law department understands the urgency of this, and I'm counting on them, and I'm counting on the liquor control people to hear our case and see you in court, so to speak. Ms. Briggs, will you call a roll on the motion, please?
Yes, President Brady. Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes. And now on the resolution.
Mr. Meinzer?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, that resolution is passed. concludes our regular agenda, and we'll turn to our city manager for his report.
Thank you, Commission President, Commissioners, audience, and staff. I will start with the donations. First, a donation of $15 was received from Melvin Gray for the Sandusky Police Department. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion is approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks.
Next, a thank you to the Friends of the Greenhouse for managing roofing repairs and replacement of gutters and downspouts at the city greenhouse. In addition to being awarded $5,000 from the Dorn Foundation and just over $3,500 from the Mylander Foundation, they contributed an additional $286.80 to contribute to work completed by Horvath Roofing. I'd ask for a motion to accept all of those donations.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion is approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks.
Sandusky Rec would like to thank an anonymous donor for their contribution of $150 to support the Youth Scholarship Fund. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to the anonymous donor.
Next, a donation of $25,000 was received from the Dorn Foundation to update the city's Bicentennial Vision Plan. Staff is still working through potential timelines that will allow us to begin the updating of the Bicentennial Vision Plan. Our goal is to do it both in a timely fashion that allows us to take a look at potential specifics as to stimulus funds and other resources, but also to be deliberate so that we can do as much of the outreach in that plan in an in-person way, post more people being vaccinated due to the pandemic and the response to that. So stay tuned. We'll be back soon to talk about the process for updating the Bicentennial Vision Plan, which, as you know, was a 5-year plan with the planning taking place in 2015 and the approval of that plan happening at the last meeting in 2015 and the first meeting in 2016. But for now, I'd like to approve the grant of the Dorn Foundation. A motion to approve the grant of the Dorn Foundation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to the Dorn Foundation.
Thanks. And then finally, as to donations, the following businesses have provided $200 sponsorship donations for the upcoming Love Where You Live cleanup series. Volstead Bar, Murray & Murray, Erie Blacktop, O Supplies, Lakeland Design, and Eco Tree Services. I'd ask for a motion to accept those generous donations.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved, and hearing no objection, that motion is approved with our thanks to those companies.
Thank you. Moving on to administration. First, just an update that staff is working with Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur's office to apply for congressional community project funding available in the federal budget through the Federal Highway Administration for the landing and the Sandusky Bay Pathway. These earmarked grant dollars are highly competitive and will keep commission updated as we gather new information. Also, the city will be issuing an RFQ for an entertainment partner to provide services related to the new Jackson Street Pier amenities. Legislation and more information will be provided at a later date. Also, Erie County is looking to make a transportation improvement district, which could help the county secure more funds from ODOT. They're seeking a letter of support from the city. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve a letter of support for Erie County's proposed transportation improvement district.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and a second discussion. Without objection, that motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved.
Thank you. Moving on to the fire department, Kyle Betzel has been given a conditional offer of employment for an open firefighter position. Current firefighter Steve Haynes has resigned effective April 27th or tomorrow. Also for finance, the filing deadline for municipal income tax returns has been extended until May 17th. With everyone's health and safety in mind, we offer contact-free ways to easily file and pay your municipal taxes. Visit ritaohio.com for more information. Also for the building department, and we hope to be doing a few of these in the weeks to come, we wanted to congratulate and welcome back Melissa Vasallo, who is the new permit technician for the building department and started today. Melissa began employment with the city of Sandusky in 2018, but unfortunately, due to her lack of seniority, was one of the positions that we had to eliminate during the pandemic last year. We are so very excited to be able to offer her an opportunity to return to employment with the city. And she said today how excited she is to be back with the city as well. Also for Public Works, there are several major sewer, water, and street projects taking place throughout the city. Please respect the lives of construction workers trying to improve the infrastructure in our community and be mindful of work zones. A map of all road closures and detours is available on the city's website and updated weekly. Specific project-related updates continue to be provided to all impacted stakeholders. Also, the asphalt plants are now open for 2021. Everyone is encouraged to report any potholes by calling 419-627-5829 or emailing web_potholes@ci.sandusky.oh.us. Also, congratulations to Jason Haynes and Charlie Colas for passing their Class 2 wastewater certification. And for Venice Road, two-way traffic will shift slightly, but be maintained with construction barrels for trench repairs along the northern edge of Venice. The contractor is completing trench repairs and reviewing new sewer video to determine if additional repairs will be required. They're finishing grading stone for the multi-use path on the north side of Venice in preparation for placing the Sandusky Bay pathway as soon as all underground repairs are complete. Also in 2021, Ohio Edison will be using Penn Line Tree Service to perform forestry operations throughout the city over the next several months. Property owners are encouraged to contact Ohio Edison at 1-800-633-4766 prior to making arrangements for any private tree services this year. Moving on to the Community Cleanup and Beautification Series, Love Where You Live, which continues with the following events. A clean welcome will take place on volunteers are invited to help clean up the main corridors in downtown. Also, Love Where You Play will take place on Saturday, May 8th. Volunteers are invited to clean up various parks in preparation for summer programming. And neighborhood cleanups will be taking place in various areas throughout the city every Saturday until October, thanks to Commissioner Waddington. Residents are also welcome to drop off yard waste at Barnes Nursery, 1630 Camp Road, Huron, on Saturday, May 15th and Sunday, May 16th. For further details about these events, please go to our website or contact 419-627-5829. We do want to give a hearty thank you to all those who were involved in the drop-off day that took place this past Saturday. It was incredibly well attended. I got out there later in the day and saw that there had been lines through both pictures and viewing all the way back to Columbus Avenue. Many people participated in that. We filled every dumpster. And I just want to really thank the Public Works Department for their really hard work in making all of that possible. It was a great kickoff to this series, and we're very thankful for that work. And I've heard from several community members, many of whom who are been in the community for a long time, as well as those who are newer to the community, who were just thrilled and took advantage of that opportunity. So thank you, City Commission, for your support for that event, and thank you, staff, all of you who helped to make it possible. Also, the playground at the Sandusky Bay Pavilion property has had multiple issues that have become maintenance and safety concerns. Public Works is recommending removal as the cost to repair or replace the existing structure would not be cost effective at this time. We will review when or where that playground structure could be replaced as larger improvements to the Sandusky Bay Pavilion and Battery Park project take place. But for now, residents are advised to use the new and accessible playground at Huron Park or the Shoreline Park playground as an alternative, as both parks are within less than a mile of the Sandusky Bay Pavilion area. Also for the Planning Department, the Arts and Culture Commission would like to ask for approval to apply for the Asphalt Art Initiative 2021 grant. If awarded, this would supply up to $25,000 for artistic crosswalks to create a safer crossing for pedestrians in 2022. The commission voted to apply to redo the Hancock and Huron intersection of the city. I'd ask for a motion to apply for that grant.
So moved.
Second?
Been a motion and a second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, that motion is approved.
Thank you. The next Arts and Culture Commission is scheduled for Tuesday, May 18th at 5:15 p.m. The Landmarks Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 19th at 5 p.m. The next Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 20th at 4:30 p.m. Hold on 1 second. And the next planning commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 28th at 5 p.m. Moving on to recreation to close out the evening. The Sandusky Recreation Division is looking forward to this weekend when 3 community-focused fitness opportunities become available. Open Way Yoga is going to be hosting a free introduction to yoga session this Saturday, May 1st at 7 p.m. at the Jackson Street Pier. The session will kick off a summer scheduled yoga sessions in the city. Yoga classes for $5 each will be scheduled for each Saturday from May through September at 7 a.m. at the Jackson Street Pier, weather permitting, with pre-registration being required. Also, additional yoga sessions will be scheduled Wednesday evenings from 6 to 6:45 p.m. at the outdoor pergola at the Sandusky Greenhouse. These sessions will run Memorial Day through Labor Day and also cost $5 with pre-registration required. And finally, free sunrise Tai Chi yoga will start the Thursday after Memorial Day, June 3rd at Shoreline Park, starting at 6 a.m. and will run through Labor Day. Also, this Saturday will mark the start of Peer Pressure, a free community workout at the Jackson Street Pier. Those sessions run every Saturday morning in May through September and start at 8 a.m. It'll feature 30 to 45-minute workouts, including an exercise program with trainers, including Tim Dorsey Fitness, Zumba with Mel, Next Level Fit Academy, and CrossFit Sandusky. Pre-registration is recommended, but waivers can be signed electronically prior to the start of each session. And finally, this Sunday, May 2nd, will mark the first race of the 2021 Run Dusky Race Series, as the annual Running Laps with Lions will take place at 9 a.m. in Lions Park. Registration is still available and COVID protocols will be followed. The Sandusky Recreation Division would like to thank Firelands Regional Health System for their generous support in the partnership with Peer Pressure and the Run Dusky Race Series programming, part of our joint efforts to promote active living and wellness within the city of Sandusky. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions or take comments. Thank you very much.
Commissioners, questions for City Manager?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Waddington.
I want to piggyback on I brought up earlier the paint program that we had at one time for low and moderate incomes. The city manager did get back with me on this. I like this idea. He says he wonders if it might be easier to fund this with issue 8 housing funds, which don't have all the same restrictions and reporting requirements, versus a CDBG. But he said he'd be open to any of the ideas. So I'd like to ask Mr. Murray, I know you were around when we did that, and I thought it was pretty successful. If you could maybe chime in on this.
Well, I think it was a great program. It allowed people to help themselves who needed it. They either had to do it themselves, or we were able to partner up with various public service groups who were willing to do the work as well. And so I think it's just it's low-hanging fruit, and it's a smart thing for us to do. Mr. Waddington, do you remember how we funded it, what amount we funded it?
It was, I believe it was like in the $3,000 to $5,000 area. And then we had someone go out, if I recall, I stopped a couple times. I know it was St. Mary's, might have been their high school. They had to get hours in for volunteering. They were just finishing the house. I thought they did an excellent job, and they had a fun time. It just saves on a homeowner that might be in a tough area right now, even low or moderate income right now, as far as saving the house. And I think that sends a message out for our neighborhoods, as far as neighborhood initiatives, that we have something like that where you can apply here. And I would like to see maybe upwards of $7,000 to $8,000 in the paint and supplies and that to help, and then follow up. We have a beautification program, but we could follow up with this too, and that's a benchmark or something that we can all be proud of, especially at the table. Thank you.
I think that's the right amount.
And through the commission president, to Commissioners Waddington and Murray, I will speak with Director Holliday and then Deb Eversole as well about this. We are looking to bring back the community outreach coordinator position, hopefully in place by summer. So this could be good timing as a program to look at, for that they could help organize the partnerships that might be a part of bringing something like this back. So we'll take a close look at it quickly and try to figure out how we can staff it, fund it, and then check back in with the commission from there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Meiser.
I'm going to argue with Dave. Both of my children contributed labor hours to painting houses, and they didn't have fun. It was like a hot job. and I admire him for doing it. I think that we're going to run out of labor before we run out of money. So I would say that we should not set a limit on it. We should look at it if we could find faith-based organizations or young kids or children, like somebody willing to mentor them to go out and paint the elderly's homes. Like, let's not put an end on it. Like, we should just keep it open-ended. Like, if the more volunteers and the more kids that want to do that kind of stuff, we should support it.
Thank you.
Mr. Meiser, you and I are familiar with the YES program. I think both of our kids benefited from that, and you're right. It teaches them so much. It teaches them teamwork. It teaches them community service. They're not the only ones that have that, though. We just benefited this weekend from great community service from the Gentlemen's Club at our dump day.
Yeah.
It's those kind of organizations that there's something in it for the neighborhoods, but there's something in it for all of us, and there's something in it for them. So I think that's a great idea, and I think you're right. I think we'll run out of paint before we'll run out of labor, I hope. A great idea. Let's see if we can make the most of that. Additional questions for City Manager?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. I mean, anything I can do to help or be a resource of any kind, I'd love to. But I would also, I work pretty closely with, Mrs. Brandy Bennett, the Global Internship Coordinator at Sandusky High. So I'm just wondering if she could possibly serve as a resource just to, find some volunteers as well. But I support this, man. That would be awesome all the way around. So.
Excellent ideas for all of us. No more questions for the City Manager. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, are items of old business. Any items of old business, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
That'd be Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I guess I probably could have just taken that opportunity to segue into this. But I just wanted to, it's my pleasure actually to announce we actually just we just completed our third year of the Drive for a Better Future program that is offered through Rick and Megan Holgerfie's foundation, For Love with Love charity. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing students again for the third year in a row, and I finally sent off my selections. Typically, we set out to do, we offer 12 grants each year. However, this year, after it got a little tough for me to make to limit it to 12 this year, so I reached out to Rick and Megan and asked them if we could if they'd be so kind to bump it up to 14, and they were more than happy to do so. So this Wednesday afternoon around like 2 o'clock, we will be presenting those grants to those students. And for those that aren't familiar, it's actually to assist in these students' driver's education. And typically that costs on average about $350. And last year, St. Mary's Central Catholic also joined the program as well. But now that we're hopefully, fingers crossed, kind of getting past this whole COVID deal, or at least on the, the other side of the hill, so to speak, I know my plan is sort of kind of acting as the lead guy for this program, is to really begin not only making, more people aware of it, but also begin some more fundraising campaigns for this, because this is such a great, opportunity and vehicle, no point intended, for these students and for families, as it is oftentimes a barrier and a hardship for many families to not only get their kids, through this driver's ed program, but also it's a barrier for for these students to get to and from work and or school as they look to graduate. So a big thanks to everyone involved. Again, Mrs. Brandy Bennett, the whole board at For Love with Love, and most importantly, Rick and Megan and all the other partners involved. So we appreciate all the support and look forward to continuing this for years to come. So thank you.
Any additional items of old business, Commissioners? Moving to items of new business. Any items of new business?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waddington.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Klein, if he's still on, I bounced this on a few of the commissioners, I think maybe 3 or 4 of you. At Lions Park, I would like to see or have signage for a sanctuary area along the water, looping into where the playground area is. And I'd like to submit or have 3 educational signs on pollination for bees and monarchs. This can become an educational area for students and residents alike. And a few years back, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I'd say 5 years ago now, we were already designated a monarch designation city, and I want to keep adding to that. We have, last fall, I had a call, I believe it was on a Thursday, to come out, and there were several hundred monarchs roosting on a couple of the trees along the pathway there. We do have the pollinator plants out there, but I think it could become more. A lot of cities like California and Florida have sanctuary areas where we could have signage for learning area, and then when this occurs, even for bees or the to learn about pollination, because that's your food source in the future, and we're losing more and more. And I've been going on this for several years about this, but I would like to have that become a sanctuary area, and then have maybe as many as 3 signs, educational type signs, that we could erect out there. Again, I'm going to lean on Mr. Murray. He was involved when we did the monarchs for the city, and I think you've seen the roosting in your area too, right?
I grew up with it as a kid, and when we would go down by the pond, there was a giant oak tree there that would literally be covered with monarchs. And you just don't see that kind of aggregation of monarchs anymore. And I think the idea of having the signs is really important. You know, we've lost something like 40% of the bee population and the insect population in this country, and that's very serious. No bees, no food. You're done. That's the end of the ecosystem. At that point in time, and so I fully support that that effort to create a sanctuary, but also I think even more important, because we're planting a seed with the kids that are reading it, so that they understand going forward. They will be better stewards of this planet than we've been.
Right.
Great. And through the commission president to Commissioner Waddington, we can have staff look into this right away. I think this is really important, and these are great steps that are, you know, so much in line with the things we discussed earlier about creating a greener city and a sustainable world. I've already had a brief chat with Director Klein about this, and with the parks being involved, certainly Jason Whirling and Recreation can be a part of that conversation. So we'll do what we can, and we appreciate you for being such a leader on important issues.
Additional items of new business, Commissioners.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meiser.
I just wanted to remind Mr. Waddington that we had a lady stand up a few months back and offered some milkweed seeds. I'm sorry. It's just so hard for me to listen to Mr. Waddington talk about sanctuaries and butterflies. Hercules.
Commissioner Meiser, you have missed the mark entirely. Mr. Waddington is a man for all seasons. You're truly a freshman commissioner if you don't know that. Any additional items of new business, commissioners? Ms. Briggs, are there any communications from residents regarding city business?
President Brady, we didn't receive anything for the public comment period tonight.
Thank you. I've run out of topics. I've run out of agenda items, commissioners, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.